Now I'm going to start working on veneering the top of the top. We just veneered the bottom of the top, now the top of the top. Now this is going to be a sunburst pattern of walnut with a center pattern of curly maple. And so what I'm going to have to do is cut the walnut wedges. They're going to be 10-degree wedges, and tape them together, and then put the curly maple veneer on top, and then go ahead and set down this big heavy template. I then cut around the outline through both the curly maple and the walnut, and that way the curly maple inset should fit exactly inside the walnut. Then I'll tape that up and we'll be ready to glue that on. To make the center panel, it's 58 1/8 long. My veneer here, I can get a very comfortable 8-inch width out of this, and I want to book match sections that are oriented this way. So I've got 8 sheets of veneer, which should give me 64 inches, which gives me some wiggle room. Always like to have a little bit to play with. And the width is about 21 1/2, so I'm going to cut 28-inch long pieces to give me plenty of overlap, plus there's a little discoloration down here which maybe will be good or maybe it won't. I want to see it spread out before I make a decision. So I'll go ahead and cut 28s because that way I can get nice clear sections out of that to make a nice book match. Okay, I've got my veneer cutting saw on a straight edge. Just go ahead and cut through these. Make sure you hold your straight edge down nice and tight so that the veneer saw doesn't tear the veneer. You don't want it pulling out a section of veneer at the end of the cut. And there we go. We got 8 sections which we can now trim and book match, but before we trim it, I'm going to go ahead and flatten this veneer. This curly maple has a lot of texture. It's a little bumpy. That's what gives it its curl. I want to try to flatten that out a little bit. This is going to be a desk, and so it'd be nice if the surface is fairly smooth. And I find it glues on better if it's been smoothed out some. So to do that, we soften the veneer. You can mix up your own softener. There's various recipes in various books. I simply bought a gallon of super soft advanced veneer softener from veneersupplies.com. Joe Woodworker has somebody make this up, and you know, a whole gallon's going to last me a long time. All you got to do is brush it on, let it soak in. Then you can either put the veneers between layers of absorbents with some weight on them, or you can use a clothes iron to iron the veneer. I prefer the clothes iron method. It lets me see what's happening. It lets me have a little better control, I think, of the actual flattening process, and it also makes the veneer so it can be used sooner because the iron dries out a lot of moisture. So what I'll do is I'll start by just brushing this on liberally using a foam applicator. It'll soak all the way through the veneer, so I went ahead and put some paper down on my piece of MDF. Try to keep most of this off the MDF. This solution is, I believe, pretty much water with some glycerin and a few other things just to make it so it penetrates and softens. I've lettered each piece of veneer so I can get them back into the same order in which they came off of the flitch. The flitch being the board that was sliced into veneers. And that way I can get the best book match. Just put A next to B. When I flip B over, I should have a fairly perfect book match. So the process is pretty simple here. One by one I take the sheets with the iron set to a medium heat. I simply iron the veneer, and I'll just do each side a couple of times until it feels like it's drying out pretty well. I'm not trying to get it perfectly dry, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these sheets and then I'm going to lay them up between layers of shop towel, weight them down, and let them completely dry under weight. But this sure speeds up the process. You've got to be careful with this veneer. You don't want to crack it. When you get veneer saturated with the softening solution, it causes the veneer to expand. It changes shape, which is a reason you never want to pre-cut your veneer and then soften it. You do it the other way around. Get the softening done, let the veneer dry to its final shape, and then cut it to the exact size you need. You know, this drying process, this whole softening and drying process is somewhat time consuming and is a good example of why custom-made furniture made with these very nice veneers can be expensive. You know, it would be tough to set up a production process doing this just for one piece of furniture. So it's pretty much got to be done by hand, very slowly and exactly, to get the very best result. And that takes time. And I'll just take my piece of veneer and I'm starting to make a stack. Here's the first piece that I flattened. A little paper towel on top to act as an absorbent, separate the pieces. Go ahead and put the second piece on, try to get it lined up the same so that when I weight it down later I get all the pieces well supported. And then take some shop towel, and you know, you can reuse the shop towel. You're just basically cutting it up here, and then later on you've got a bunch of shop towels made up for your regular work. No waste. And now that my veneer is all ironed and stacked between sheets of paper towel, I've gone ahead and I've put one of my forms for bent laminations, which are pretty heavy, stacked a bunch of magazines on top, and then put a 50-pound iron weight on top of that, and I'm just going to let that sit until all those veneers are nice and dry. Okay, well, I've had this curly maple veneer under weight for over a day, and it's come out. It feels very, very smooth. Definitely much smoother than it was before we softened it and flattened it. So we're in good shape for that. Now I've made a template of one ray of the Sunburst that is going to be walnut veneer, and the idea is that this is a 10-degree angle wedge. If I cut the piece of veneer to match someplace along this wedge, they all should fit together, and 36 pieces should do 360 degrees around the table, or the top. I put a nail right in the center of my work surface here, and this template was made to center on the nail at the apex of the 10 degrees, and then I could swing this around and make marks on my surface here to show where the pieces of veneer would be. I do that so that then I can measure the size of that veneer, the lengths, and figure out on my template about where they go, and that enables me to cut the veneer so I don't waste a lot. The way I cut this wedge is just a hair oversized, so that when you come all the way around full circle, you got about a 1/4 inch of overlap. I've tested this about 3 times going around the circle. I get a little bit of overlap, which is what I want, because then I can just do very fine adjustment on the last few veneer sheets to take up that 1/4 inch. It's better to have a little more veneer and be able to shave off, because you can't stretch it. My veneer stretcher is broken. So that's what we're going to do, and it'll work. I've marked up all these pieces of veneer to the shape of the 36 different wedges, and when I can cut 2, I always cut at least 2 at a time, because each pair is book match, and sometimes I was able to get 4 pieces in one bundle here. And then using my saw, my veneer saw, and backing board and a straight edge, I'm cutting along those lines to give me the rough cut out. Then later on I'll use the clamp I have for planing veneer to actually just make the edges perfect. And the idea is to get them to all fit together perfectly around 360 degrees. Got to be very careful that I do the lineup, and of course this is walnut, so it's dark and it's a little difficult to see the pencil line. I've got to be very careful I don't cut on the wrong line. And there's my waist. Here's my cut piece. I'm working my way around the desktop, hand fitting each book matched pair of veneer pieces based on the lines I had drawn. Now here's a package of rough cut veneers to fill these 2 slots and the adjacent 2 slots on the other side of the desk. First thing I need to do is make these edges perfectly true. So to do that, I will use one of my jigs, clamping jigs, to hold the work in the vise, so I can do a little hand planing. Now this particular piece is rather short, so I'll use my short clamping jig. And all this is I've taken some poplar pieces, made 2 clamping jaws, 2 strong backs, with bolt going through each end, nut on there, socket wrench. I can go ahead and insert the work into the jig carefully. I don't want to break any edges. Flip it up on its side. Push the edge through a little bit so it protrudes just a bit. Then go ahead and make sure that the jaws are nice and parallel, a little bit protrusion, and then tighten up the jaws. And then I'll put this into the vise, and I now have a good surface on which to plane these edges. With the veneer clamp assembly in the vise, I can take my plane. I'm using a low angle smooth plane with a 50-degree bevel iron. That will minimize any tear out in the edge of the veneer, and since I'm only taking a very thin shaving, it's not too difficult to push through the material. And I'll just take a few strokes with the plane until I can see that the surfaces are nice and smooth. There we are, ready to flip this over, cut the other side, and then tape it up.